It takes a certain amount of know-how and skill, but when it's appropriate, writing and recording cues in free time has some real advantages. The click tracks are great for up-tempo, long cues where staying in tight sync with the picture is important. But when the score needs to be expressive, when the music needs to breathe, there is no substitute for being able to play music as it was intended, with variation and expression. And by the way, studio musicians love it when they don't have a click track banging away in one ear. Other than this field, no musician is expected to perform music to a metronome. Practice, yes. Perform, no. So a cue can be entirely free time, or might be a combination of click track for certain sections and free time for the others. Another option, mostly used at slower tempos, emulates free time to some extent. This method is a sort of hybrid where a click track is used, but the clicks are sent only to the conductor's headset. The rest of the orchestra must follow the conductor. And when time is short, this method can sometimes reduce the number of takes involved with getting that perfect performance. Now, I've mentioned studio musicians and a conductor, but free time can also be used with an electronic score. You wouldn't think that a conductor would be necessary with an electronic score, but using a webcam movie of yourself or someone else conducting is a very good idea. And here's why. Let's say you play your perfectly timed mock-up for the director, the cue that you just played in while watching the scene. No click, just you playing freely along with the picture. The director tells you she really likes your cue the way it is, but wouldn't it be great to have a real instrument in there? How about using now that instrument, whatever it is, will almost certainly turn out to be an instrument you don't play. So, when you bring in the sackbut player, he can now read the music and watch the conductor. This will greatly reduce the time it takes to get the performance you need. And any additional sweetening or overdubs will benefit from the digital movie of a conductor. And we'll talk more about conducting and podium procedure in another video, but just know that even rudimentary conducting skills will serve you very well. So, how do we begin? I always recommend we begin with a sketch. When sketching a cue which will use click track, you can create the kind of sketch which only requires you to choose a tempo, at first anyway. No musical ideas are necessary. Using the tempo and time code, you can find the location of the important dramatic events, including dialogue and sound effects, or the sonic competition as I like to call it, before you write a note of music. Free time's a little different. It calls for having a musical idea first, and then contouring that musical idea to fit into the scene. For example, you might have a melodic theme which would be perfect for the scene. Now you still want to pay close attention to the important dramatic events and sonic competition, so you will need a sketch, but rather than creating new music around these elements, we'll be conforming existing music to fit. You will have to build this sketch a little at a time, placing music, then an event, then some more music, and then another event. This may require extending a phrase or shortening one, speeding up, slowing down, maybe the use of a fermata. Now, because this music is for film and video, it must stay at least loosely in sync with the picture. And just as the click track is a synchronization tool, there are tools for free time as well. Many of the same tools we use today have been around since the earliest days of film scoring, but as you might imagine, were created in very different and interesting ways in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and even the 70s. By far the most common of these tools is the streamer. Now, streamers are vertical lines that move from left to right across the monitor or the big screen at the rear of the scoring stage. Most common are the ones that take 2 seconds to travel from the left-hand edge to the right-hand edge of the screen or monitor. When the streamer reaches the right-hand edge, something important happens. The recording of every cue starts with two different streamers. First is the yellow streamer, and when it reaches the right-hand edge of the screen, the warning clicks start. And I hear you say, I thought we weren't using clicks. And you'd be right. But we will use warning clicks, which will give the conductor and the musicians a gentle reminder of the approximate starting tempo. When you have 30 or 40 cues to record, there's no way you can remember all the starting tempos. And sometimes the tempo at the end of the cue may be very different from the tempo at the beginning. So the warning clicks will get you settled into that initial tempo again for subsequent takes. So the yellow streamer is followed by the green streamer, and when it reaches the right-hand edge of the screen, it signals the first note of music, which is referred to as the downbeat, whether it actually is a downbeat or a pickup. So the sequence would look something like this. Now, if you're like me, you might be asking, who came up with that? Well, the who is hard to determine, but the early method used to create streamers is very interesting. You see, by the early 1900s, movies were being shot using 35mm film. And 35mm film runs through the camera and the projector at a rate of 24 frames per second. Therefore, a 2-second streamer would use 48 frames, and 48 frames just happens to equal 3 feet of 35mm film. They figured out a way, using a contraption called a streamer board, to make a scratch on the film exactly 3 feet long. The scratch started from the left side of the film and ran diagonally to the right side. The scratch was then colored using ink to make it whatever color they needed, and when projected on the screen, this appeared to be a vertical line moving from left to right. Now, as you can imagine, changing the location of a streamer was a much bigger job than it is today with computer-generated streamers. Two other synchronization tools are punches and flutters. Punches are round flashes of white light centered in the middle of the screen. They were originally made by actually punching a hole in the single frame of the 35mm film. Today, punches are mostly used as a kind of punctuation at the exact moment the streamer hits the right edge of the screen. In free time, so-called hits or catches are much more relaxed. Being close is perfect enough. So flutters can be used for a soft indication of where the first beat of every bar should fall. In the past, flutters were made by punching 3 to 5 of the same size holes every other frame, which created a surprisingly soft, fluttering white light. And this fluttering light was easily seen by the conductor while keeping his eyes on the score. Remember that unlike today's modern scoring stages, in those early days, there was no television monitors at the conductor's podium. The only place the film could be seen was on a screen at the far back end of the scoring stage. And for the conductor to have to look up from the score just before a page turn or a change of time signature was really risky. So the fluttering white light reflecting off the screen and onto the score was a kind of visual landmark which would allow the conductor to catch up if he was late or slow down if he was early. The final tool we use today is timecode, SEPTI timecode. Its predecessor was a scoring clock, sometimes referred to as a sweep clock or a stop clock. It's a clock with no hours, just minutes and seconds like a stopwatch, but supersized and sitting in the center of the conductor's desk. It was started and stopped by the music editor at the conductor's downbeat and cutoff. These then are the primary tools we still use today to stay in sync with the picture. The time to use free time is when the music needs to be expressive, when it needs variation, when it needs to breathe. And this is often determined by the subject matter of the film. In an action film, probably not. But good candidates would be dramatic or period film, or a romantic or emotional scene, which could be part of an action film. So for the examples in this video, I'll use a scene from a romantic comedy that I scored. The film gave me the opportunity to use a small acoustic orchestra, create some melodic, thematic material, and because of those two things was the perfect situation for the use of free time. It's a love story about a mature couple who have lost their spouses, one to cancer and the other to Alzheimer's disease. On their first meeting at the hospice, Julie Andrews offers a ride to a stranded James Garner. And in a heavy snowstorm, they become stuck in a snowdrift and are forced to break into an unoccupied cabin in order to survive the storm. Reminiscing and sharing details of their relationships with their lost spouses, they bond and find a second chance at love. I'll use the final scene from the film where James Garner gets them stuck again in a snowdrift, but this time on purpose, in order to give Julie a surprise. So let's look at the scene.
I've tried to find my way back here. I've always got lost.
Well, I spend a lot of time here.
Really? If you stranded us here on purpose, it was a waste of time. Charlie and Robin are home, it seems.
Well, maybe Howard and Millie will let us in to warm up.
Robert, you can't barge in on people on Christmas morning. You mustn't interrupt, Robert.
I'm sure they'll be happy to see us.
Probably afraid to answer the door. Robert? He's crazy. Where are Charlie and Robin?
Howard and Millie moved to Florida. The place was for sale.
This is your vacation home? You bought it?
Yeah, just for an emergency, in case I ever got stranded again. Do you believe in second chances?
I'm a woman of science. I only believe in what I see.
Merry Christmas, Bill.
Merry Christmas, Howard.
Think it needs a little music? And now, let me familiarize you with the musical material I'll be using in this example. Now, these are motifs and themes I've previously used throughout the film. The first is a motif. Then there is an accompaniment figure I created for a melody. I'll be using just the accompaniment figure by itself, no melody. And finally, this B, or secondary theme. So the first thing that occurred to me was that this was the end of the film, and the final shot of them kissing as the camera pulls back is the perfect place for music to swell and end the movie. There are so few places in any film where everyone agrees the volume level of the music should come up, and this is one of those places. So I decided that this was the place for my B theme. I merely now had to determine where it should start. Now, the place I decided on was when Julie asks the question,
You bought it?
and steps through the door. The SEMPTE code is 46 minutes, 12 seconds, and 14 frames, and I'll request a streamer at that location. Now, my method for auditioning how a piece of music will fit is to watch the scene, conduct while I sing the music. Don't worry, I won't subject you to my singing, but singing or humming means that I'm totally unencumbered by my skill level on an instrument. And it also affords me a free hand to hit a marker key or make a note while the scene is running. After each pass, I get a little better feel for where I'll need to speed up, slow down, drop a note or a measure, and so on. Now, there are certain places in the scene that I hope will line up nicely, creating that magic that happens when a visual and music join forces. The two places I'm mostly concerned about are the kiss and the place where the music will end. So, after singing and conducting several times, here's the result. Completely free time with 3 streamers, one at 46 minutes, 12 seconds, and 14 frames when Julie enters the cabin, another at the kiss, and the final red streamer at the last note, which is not necessarily the cutoff.
This is your vacation home? You bought it?
Yeah, just for an emergency, in case I ever got stranded again. Do you believe in second chances?
I'm a woman of science. I only believe in what I see.
Merry Christmas, Bill.
Merry Christmas, Howard.
Okay, now let's move to the beginning of the scene, knowing that when we get to the point where the theme starts, we'll need to allow for a transition and maybe even a modulation. They've just gotten stuck, accidentally on purpose, and start walking for help. The attitude of the moment is light, especially for James, and it looks very cold, so I'm thinking upper register strings and moderately soft on my motif number 1. The cabin is revealed visually by the director, and the writer gives us Julie's dialogue of,
Oh! I've tried to find my way back here. I always got lost.
Now, I'd like the music to discover the cabin too. However, I have to find a way to recognize the cabin so that I don't duplicate the director's reveal. I want to avoid anything which might be on the nose, over the top, or Mickey Mouse. I also want to avoid a sonic competition with Julie's dialogue. Music will always lose a competition with dialogue. So first, I have to decide just what the music will be doing for this moment. What is its purpose, its reason for being there? Well, it can confirm that this is the very same cabin they found during the storm. That might be helpful if the audience didn't take notice of the cabin's exterior when it was first seen earlier in the film. But Julie's dialogue confirms that. I think the most important thing music can do in this situation is express the warmth of the memory Julie is feeling. The warmth of the memory is something which can't be seen by the camera, nor can it be expressed by sound effects. Julie, as an actor, can convincingly express the existence of the memory by saying, "Oh," but music emulates that warm physical sensation that comes with romantic memories. Now, in order not to conflict with or compound the effect of the dialogue recognition of the cabin, I'll fit my musical warmth in the pause right after Julie's line, "Oh," which just barely precedes the visual reveal. So here I'll place a streamer and continue to use the same motif, motif number 1, but this time play it down in the mid-range strings where it's warmer. And I'll add a soft harp arpeggio. The next point I have an idea for is after James's line of dialogue. Maybe Howard and Millie will let us in to warm up.
Maybe Howard and Millie will let us in to warm up.
EOL stands for end of line, and that's where I want to start my accompaniment motif as they walk toward the cabin.
Robert, you can't barge in on people on Christmas morning.
When they get to the porch, I'll stop the motion, reflecting their arrival at the front door. This, then, is the process. Diagnose what the scene needs from the music. Decide what music you want to use, and gracefully contour the music to fit that particular scene. Use timecode, streamers, punches, and flutters to help keep the music in loose sync with the visual. Here is the score for the full scene with streamers.
Find my way back here. I've always got lost.
Well, I spend a lot of time here.
Really? You stranded us here on purpose. It was a waste of time. Charlie and Robin are home, it seems.
Maybe Howard and Millie will let us in to warm up.
Robert, you can't barge in on people on Christmas morning. Interrupt, Robert.
I'm sure they'll be happy to see us.
Probably afraid to answer the door. Robert? He's crazy. Charlie and Robin.
Howard and Millie moved to Florida. The place, you say.
This is your vacation home? You bought it?